Started. We want to honor your time, and I know a lot of you are enjoying visiting with each other, but I also know that you have other things on your plate today. So we need to go on and get started. And I'm going to ask Chairman Nix to open our meeting with prayer.
Okay, let's pray. Lord, we thank you for this day as we thank you for all days you give us. We pray that you would make our time here productive, Lord, that we would look at those things that really need to be looked at and make decisions that would be pleasing to you. Father, just go with us and bless all that we do in Christ's name. Amen.
Thank you. I know here is Representative Hawkins. We're glad you're here. And I believe that Chairman Dixon will be coming, but I think he was in another meeting, and so he... No, you sit wherever you want to. Come on, sit right here. I'm sure he'll be coming in as soon as he can. Courtney has already said this, but let me just mention it again. This will be the last time for public comments. So if you feel that you may want to say something, we would encourage you to sign up, and there is a sheet up on the table with a pen, I believe. And even during the meeting, if you have a thought that comes to you and you want to sign up, then just go right up there and sign up, and we'll appreciate that. We have added a meeting, and that will be next Thursday at 10:30. It will be from 10:30 to 12. It will be to consider recommendations only, and we will be talking to determine what recommendations we want to put in our report. But as I said, there will be no public comments. So if you want to say something, please say it today. We want to hear from you. We're pleased today to have David Hill from the Georgia Professional Standards Commission. And David's going to be sharing with us a little bit, and I'll just let him tell us. David, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, and then just go with what you're here to tell us. It should be on.
Okay.
Thank
you so much. That's on, right? Good. Okay. My role at the commission for almost 8 years has been director for educator preparation and certification. I also had another career for 31 years in the P-12 arena. 18 of those years I was a high school principal and supervised many counselors. So I have seen counseling from that side, and then I happen to be married to a retired counselor. So, okay. So, and I assume you will interrupt with questions. Please do.
If that's okay, we will interrupt you.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
And I've put 2 handouts in your packet. I'll get to those in a moment. But to get started, if we think about pre-service education of counselors, it looks pretty much the same nationally. There is a set of courses based on national standards. Those are the Cacrep standards. And when you lay out a program based on those standards, it's going to look about the same across the country. So the question is, can we better prepare counselors by adding a course to the program? The program's already crowded. It would be difficult to add courses. It would be possible to change the focus of courses, because when you base programs on standards, standards are often accompanied by elements or functions under those standards, and it would be certainly possible to change the focus by encouraging the program providers to emphasize certain knowledge or skills over certain other knowledge or skills. We can also add emphasis if we had a statewide counselor assessment. We don't right now, but when you put something like that in place, then that gets the attention of program providers, and they make sure that their candidates who come out of their programs are prepared to be evaluated in that process. And of course, as you know, the legislature put in a really good set of measures for teachers and leaders under the TEKS and LEAKS system, and that system will produce excellent data on teachers and leaders, so it's almost logical to consider the value of such a system for counselors. So if we're going to make a difference, one way to do that is changing the focus at the higher ed level, not legislating more coursework, because counselor programs are very full. So let's think a little bit about in-service for counselors, and in your packet you have a one-page handout that is a chart. I'm going to hold that up to make it easy for you to find. And as I think you all know, once we get past the period of no PLUs, July 1, 2017, we implement a new system of professional learning where we'll still have no professional learning units, which raises the question, so what will professional learning look like? So in this chart, on the left-hand side is the old system of PLUs. The downside of that system, people learned quickly to count to 10. You got to have 10 PLUs. You're going to make sure you have them, even if the course doesn't pertain to my field. So we often had educators taking professional learning workshops because they were down to renewal time and they were out of time and they just needed a couple of more PLUs, so it didn't really matter. So under the new system, we will focus on continuous learning. Job embedded is the term that's used in a school learning community. While workshops were the primary focus of the old system, workshops become secondary. They do not go away. But when you look at the performance of an educator, in this case a counselor, what does the evaluation say about the needs of this particular educator, and then you develop professional learning around that set of needs. Consequently, one size fits all, like you have in workshops, goes away, and we begin to differentiate the learning of educators. And that makes sense, probably even common sense. In the past, we had no real control over quality of workshops. With job-embedded learning, the control over quality is student performance. And just like with the TEKS and LEAKS system and student performance there that will drive improvement, if we think about the role of the counselor, looking at what are the needs of students, and through an evaluation process, does the counselor meet those needs? And if the counselor does not, what professional learning would help the counselor do that? One problem we've always had in professional learning, most schools in Georgia are small. That means they have one counselor. And so what does job-embedded learning look like for one counselor? Well, sitting in workshops with teachers who teach fourth grade or third grade or high school physics doesn't do a counselor a whole lot of good. So we have to think in terms of what is the professional learning where the counselor would work with the teachers, and what is the professional learning where that one counselor would network with counselors in other buildings, in other places, and learn from those people. But job-embedded learning allows for a lot of flexibility that will help us to address those kinds of things. Now, if we operate school systems like a cookie cutter, then that's going to be bad news for counselors, because the cookie cutter model would suggest that everybody in the school does job-embedded learning, but they all do the same thing. And so that's not going to help counselors. So we would need for superintendents and principals to be really effective in their jobs in helping counselors design appropriate professional learning, which gets us to the issue of what do principals know about counseling. And I assume there are a few counselors behind me. They might want to tell you about that later. But I can tell you that the counseling role is extremely important, and unfortunately it is a greatly abused role. It's abused for various reasons. One reason is that in leader preparation programs, there really isn't coursework that prepares a person to supervise the specific role of counselor. There are courses in personnel administration, for example, that would prepare you to supervise a wide array of people, but not quite so specifically as the counselor. So changing the focus in a leadership program might be useful. Our leadership programs are performance-based, and encouraging universities to design rigorous performances for principals related to the supervision of counselors would improve the programs. Adding another course about how to supervise the counselor, that might work, but then next year somebody wants to add another course on how to supervise somebody else and somebody else and somebody else. So that's not really the answer. But changing the focus would be. On both handouts that you have, the second handout is the those are the leadership standards for our leadership preparation programs, and I highlighted those parts of those standards that do impact counseling, and under many of the standards, one or more of those elements impact counseling. But ideally, we change the focus by requiring or strongly encouraging certain performances that would be part of that program. On both handouts, I've listed some possible solutions at the bottom of the page. These are not necessarily standalone solutions. There could be an interplay of one or more of these solutions, but as you do your work and prepare recommendations next week, some of these might be useful to you. So let me stop because I'm doing all the talking, and let me see if you have some questions.
I've been accused of being asleep at these meetings because, in fact, I got an email from somebody above my pay grade asking if I was even awake because I hadn't spoken. And usually I do speak and ask questions, but I don't know a lot about counseling, so I found out a long time ago that when I'm talking, I'm not learning, so I've been listening. But in your professional opinion, and I see that you have a good background here, what would you say is the correct student-counselor ratio?
A lot lower than it is.
Got that?
Yeah.
Can you give us a number?
There was a time when there was an accreditation standard. The Southern Association of Colleges and Schools had a standard, and I don't remember the exact number, but it was probably about 1 to 400.
How long ago was that?
Oh, it's been a decade or more ago. Now,
a lot of things have changed since then, huh?
They have, and the problems that students bring to school are even tougher. It's impossible for one person to meet the needs of 400 people or even 300 people. We have to organize schools so that the counselor is able to do his or her job, but where other people on staff can be part of that. And I want to give you an example of what that could look like. If we talk about college and career readiness counseling, and the term college means anything post-secondary, so that could be a technical college, a community college, a four-year school, could be going to some craft school, learning to be a chef or something. So there are a lot of options, but college and career counseling is a good example. If you have 400 students in the school, how do you provide that kind of counseling for 400 students? And the answer is it's not feasible, really. But if a school had an advisement program in place where the counselor is a member of a team and the counselor is the expert on that team, but not necessarily the person who runs the team. Maybe that needs to be an assistant principal because the counselor doesn't have time to run that team, but the counselor does have time to train teachers. When I was a principal at Chapel Hill High School in Douglas County, we created such a program. We created a 9 through 12 advisement curriculum so that at each grade level, teachers who were trained by the counselors delivered just little small pieces, 20 to 30 minute segments during an advisement period appropriate for that grade level, and as you went through high school, the focus on post-secondary became greater and greater. So counselors can do that, but counselors also have to be involved with children who are abused, children who are addicts, children who are homeless, and many, many other issues. So it's
Yeah,
hard.
that's what I think has risen to the surface more than anything else during this committee. And I thank the chairman for bringing this because it's brought more and more to my attention. I just left Flowery Branch Career Day. And, and as far as careers, you're right, that could be handled by other teachers. I think the really need that I see and the area that we need to address more are those students that have those problems that you're just speaking of. I mean, you're right, careers can be addressed, and they were doing that at Flowery Branch High School, having us come in to the different classes. But, we sure can't come in and talk and counsel a child that's has some real problems, and it's going to lead to a future of further problems.
Right.
I really think I'm so impressed with the counselors that can do that and willing to do that for
Right.
children.
I was just at a 3-day meeting. I was only able to be there 2 days in Jacksonville with some of the counselors here in the audience. And there was a big focus on college and career ready coupled with the equity piece. The problem we have, and this is where the counselor is a vital part of the college and career counseling, the identification of those students whose grades and performance in class might suggest that they're not going to do well in the post-secondary world, but the counselor is able to figure out what the issues are, because often the issues could be social, they could be related to boredom with school, and so you take an underperforming student and they blossom in a technical college or a university, but it takes counselors to be able to pinpoint who those people are. And with the huge loads they have, it's very difficult.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
Representative Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. With your permission, I have 2 questions. First of all, Dr. Hill, I would trust you with my life designing a counseling program for your folks who are working with you. But what about these small systems where there is one counselor? And perhaps, I don't know that they would ever, I think they have to have one counselor for each school. But how would they have a program designed for them? Who would do that for them?
That's a really tough question, but it's a really important question because it's very easy in Georgia to focus on large districts and to forget the poverty and the underfunded, very small districts in rural Georgia. And I'm a city boy, but I'm going to be the first one to speak up and say you better think about the little tiny districts. So districts have to work together. Our RESAs are very important. You can make sure that RESAs have adequate funding where they then can pool resources and support small districts in that way. Because it's very difficult when you have limited dollars. Maybe you can only afford the one counselor, but is there a nearby set of resources in a RESA? And the answer should be yes.
Very good. Thank you. That's a perfect response and makes me more comfortable because my heart does go out to these smaller systems coming from Gwinnett.
Let me give you one more piece. We strongly encourage partnerships between our universities and our school districts. And we mean a two-way partnership, not a one-way partnership. The old model was a one-way partnership. The university needed to place student teachers. The school system was the place to do it. But now those days are over. It's a two-way street. And one-way universities could help in a small district that is under-resourced would be for university faculty in counseling programs to help deliver professional learning, to work with groups of students in whatever kinds of groups were needed. Research that is done at the higher ed level could be focused on one or more small districts rather than focusing on some esoteric topic.
Thank you so much. My second question is very basic, and it doesn't have to do with the philosophy of this meeting, but has to do with staffing. You have a retired counselor who you live with every day, and recertifying for her, if she could sub for a counselor who had to be out 6 months with an illness, does she get recertified just by asking to be recertified? Does she have to take classes as a retired counselor? I see the old model, the new model, where it says no PLUs. So she can just recertify?
Sort of. And again, that's a great question, because this rule is a real paradigm shift from the PLU system that everybody was comfortable with to something that sounds interesting, but then you've already raised a question. Okay, well, what about the person who's retired? So we created in that new rule ways for people who are not currently working to do professional learning. If a person did not do professional learning and then came back into a job, part-time or full-time, then that person could be given a non-renewable certificate for 1 year.
I see.
And during that first year, meet that professional learning requirement.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank
Thank you. And Chairman Nix, please.
Thank you.
Couple of things. I'm glad you mentioned the Reese's in your discussion there. That's been one of the things that I'm kind of hoping we may be able to recommend out of this committee, is some staffing at the RESA level, especially to help the rural systems who are struggling with this. And my big interest coming in, and I'm beginning to see a lot of the things that the counselors do and where their focus is. I wanted to see more college and career counseling done. I think that a lot of the other problems we have can be done away if we can get the students to that point of getting to the point where they can have a career and support their family better than the situation they're in. Let's put it that way. But to be able to have a person at the RESA level whose only responsibility is that college and career counseling, that can go in and help those schools, especially who do not have that. And or another thing you mentioned there, maybe be able to use this as a way to recruit resources from the community to help, as you said there. Is that kind of how you're thinking about, would that meet with some of the things you're thinking about from the RESA level, being able to do that? You're talking about shared resources there?
Yeah, I think so. And you may hear things from counselors later in this meeting who might say that may or may not work. But yeah, in general, if in those areas of the state where they just don't have enough hands on the problem, then yeah, having resources at the RESA level would be very helpful.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the model that I think about with that is back a couple of years ago when we started talking about PBIS and how we needed more support in that area. We were able to come up with funds to have a person at the RESA level who could come in and work with the schools as with PBIS. And if we could kind of use that same model maybe for some funding at the RESA level to be able to get back. And what I see this as a way to kind of lighten the load of the school counselor. Another thing, Madam Chair, if I may mention too, and you know I've talked about this, I talked with Bob Swigum about the longitudinal data system mechanism that we have, and he indicated there may be some creative ways through technology to be able to help with some of this, especially in the college and career counseling part, where they could create the programs there that would be accessible by the student and their parents. They could be assigned that by the counselor or whatever to go and look at that, and then they'd know that they had at least gotten exposed to that. So maybe there's some creative ways to do some of that, especially the career counseling. That was something that I worry that maybe we're not getting to because of the other things that we're doing, and not that those other things aren't extremely valuable. They're, you know, sometimes they're the emergency we've got to get to first before we can get to the other things. But I appreciate that thought, especially on and maybe at the RESA level be able to provide resources to help.
Yeah. And the issue of career counseling is a very complex issue. Career Day is certainly nice, but that is not the answer. You have to take a deep look at data, and that's something I'm not sure we do well to identify learning needs of students. When I went to this 2-day counselor meeting, I was shocked at the data about filling out the FAFSA forms for student aid for post-secondary, and the statistics on that, and a little bit more effort by a school and a community could get that many more children in college, and the challenges of first-generation people going to post-secondary training, there are a lot of reasons why they don't get there. So when we talk about college and career, it's a really big picture, and you can't talk about that without discussing the issue of equity. And DOE has put together a good equity plan, and that needs to become part of this discussion.
Thank you.
Representative Gazaway, I believe.
Thank you. I have a couple questions if I can, but the first one is about training. You mentioned student teachers and that's sort of the two-way street. And one of the complaints I hear often is that the quality of the student teachers that we're getting varied tremendously. I don't know about counselors, and I don't know exactly. It's a different process that you evolve. I know some begin with the ambition of being a school counselor. Do we have programs in higher ed in this state adequate to produce the kind of counselors that we need? And are we demanding the type of rigor at the smaller schools that we need to be demanding in this field? I know we're not in the education field, and I just wondered what your opinion was on that.
Yeah, we have 11 program providers in Georgia that have school counseling programs. Now, some of those programs may have 0 candidates in programs. Some could be very large, but we do have 11 programs. Does the quality vary across programs? It's certainly possible that it does. We will have something in place 2 years from now called Preparation Program Effectiveness Measures. Regardless of what anybody might think about Race to the Top, that $400 million helped us develop assessment tools that will rate the quality of our preparation programs using output data rather than input data. So a couple of years down the road, we'll have good data. In the meantime, I think we all kind of feel like we have a lot of good programs, but a couple of years from now, we'll know whether or not. And if you were to ask Hank Huckabee about university system institutions, he's serious about the data. I've been in meetings with him, and if a program provider is not getting the job done, he doesn't plan for them to continue offering the program.
He and I did talk about that specifically, but we didn't talk about counselors. We just talked about it in general. Now, may I one more? I met with, I represent a district of small systems, so I have a non-urban perspective for sure. And I met with probably 20 of my counselors in my different counties before all this started. And it just seemed like the ratio being so high was 100% agreed that was the number one problem. So whenever 100% agree something's the number one problem, we probably got a good chance that's it. But what I was wondering, and this isn't really your neck of the woods, but I may ask everybody this question today. Because of the financial straits that all these systems are under, do you feel like that counselors are one of the first places to get cut, or are they getting cut just like everybody else, or
and I don't have the on-the-ground knowledge of that.
I'm just anecdotal.
Well, I think most people would agree that the media specialist might be the first one to get cut. Counselors could be behind them. I know I was on the phone a couple of years ago as the recession was still happening, and they were cutting in a system, and they were cutting in a medium-sized system, they were cutting 4 counselors. So in that system, I would think that would be a pretty big cut. So it's dangerous because we always think about the classroom teacher and the principal, and clearly the classroom teacher is the most important person when it comes to learning. But some of those kids are coming to school with such problems without the leadership of a good counselor. Now, I use the word leadership because a counselor who stays in his or her office with a cup of coffee doing paperwork, which some principals like for them to do that paperwork, then that's a misuse of a good resource. That counselor who's working with children is extremely valuable. Extremely.
I'm very familiar with both of those examples.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. The second one is the one we need to be promoting. And it seems like that the counselor I know that can do that is the better trained, has been in a rigorous profession. And he also told me that Florida's program is worse than ours. So when I heard that, I was like going, well, hold on a second.
Yeah. But also a trained principal who values the role of the counselor. That's important too.
I agree. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hill. I believe that Representative Clark had a question, but she had to step out, and so we'll email you that question.
That would be great.
If that's okay.
Sure.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your time, and I know you have another meeting.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you. And leading right into what Mr. Hill has said, we have Dr. Crystal Giddens from Clark, Atlanta, who is in the counselor educate. She is a counselor educator. Am I saying that correctly, Dr. Giddens? And we are so glad to have you with us today.
Thank you. It's a great opportunity to be here, and I thank you for it.
You might want to pull that mic over a little more towards your face. Thank you.
Okay. Get my other eyes here. Are we ready? May I start? Are we ready? Well, thank you for giving me an opportunity to talk about school counseling. It's something that I know all too well. I'm an educator of 38 years, 31 in Atlanta City schools and 7 in Cobb County schools. I've been a school counselor I started in 1986. So now I'm working at Clark Atlanta University, and this is my 4th year as an assistant professor. I never dreamed that I would now be teaching other people who wanted to be school counselors, so this is sort of full circle for me. I might also add, I heard someone talk about in the old days, the requirement to be a counselor, you had to teach first. So I was under that regime. So I actually taught school for 12 years prior to being a school counselor. Lucy might say that the professional school counselor is in the business of helping students to be all that they can be, but she might also say that she's so inundated with so many other things that does not always happen. What I want you to know at first is that school counseling is not what it used to be. I'm pretty sure you've heard a lot of remarks now about the school counselor's profession, so I don't want to belabor the point, but I do want you to know it has changed. We have so much to be thankful for to our national organization, the American School Counselors Association, for getting the word out that we are no longer guidance counselors anymore. Guidance is something we do. It's not necessarily something that we are. So our new name is the Professional School Counselors. When I talk to students at the elementary level and I talk to them about their counselors, they say counselors are lifesavers. That may sound very small, but we really are lifesavers in our schools. We take the time to make sure that students are loved, they have a sense of belonging. We believe in the hierarchy of needs for our students. So when they come to us, sometimes it is about life-changing issues that really are big for them. So we sometimes also look at ourselves as agents of life saving. I met with elementary school students on Monday, and I asked them, what do counselors do? And they said, counselors help you be. This was a pre-K class. I thought that was interesting. I said, counselors help you be? They said, yeah, counselors help you be all you want to be. So I thought this little B was appropriate because we do everything we can to help our students be all that they can be. The only difference and only thing that I would add is that we love this. This is not something we must do. This is something we elect to do. This is something we love. So we have a heart for this profession. It's not something that we take lightly. Counselors also help students to reframe their thinking. I talked to students at the high school level last week about this very subject, and they said, yeah, my counselor helps me get rid of my stinking thinking. Another student said, you shouldn't use the word stinking, you should say smelly. But anyway, we help students to reframe their thinking. And we not only help students to reframe their thinking or to think differently or outside the box, we also do this with administrators, and we also do this with faculty members. We also collaborate with people in the community, and we also work with parents. They are all agents of change that can help our students, and we realize that. So if I want to be on a little humorous side, and we do have to have fun in this profession, otherwise we will not survive it. So we try to make sure that that happens. If I can get back. My slide wants to go faster than I want to go. So we do applaud our children's success. A lot of times we talk about the negative side of what's going on in the field of education, but there are some bright moments. And we want to make sure that every child has some measure of success before they leave school. It's quite embarrassing for a child to be in the 12th grade and you ask that child to work on their resume and they have no accolades, achievement, or awards to put on that form. So you're telling me you've been in school 13 years and no one has saluted you in any way. And this includes some of my students that are in athletic programs where they've been there for many years, but no one has given them even a sheet of paper that says certificate of participation or appreciation. So counselors, we catch those things. So sometimes we might even create events so that some students may get some type of accolade before they leave school. We realize that principals are busy, teachers have the curriculum to teach, and so we're sort of in the middle, holding this whole thing together. At my church, we have what we call the cornerstone. Counselors are, in my opinion, the cornerstone of every single school. You may not want to admit it, but we are, and you're going nowhere real fast without us. I just heard some comments about the budget cuts, and I can remember about 10 years ago, this was a big deal about budget cuts for counselors. So I say to that, think about how much you want students to have their psychosocial emotional needs met. Think about the social and academic planning and the career planning for these students. Who's going to do that? The teachers are not going to do that, because if they were going to do that, they would have done it already. We are going to do that. We've been doing this for many, many years, but in varied ways, and now we're doing it at a greater level because accountability is high for us. There's been some conversation briefly about what does it take to make a counselor. First of all, let's be apprised to the fact that as a school counselor, you must already have a bachelor's degree. So you already have the stakes high. Not like a classroom teacher who can finish school in 4 years and go right into the classroom. Counselors cannot do that. They must have a bachelor's degree. We sometimes don't worry about what that bachelor's degree is in. However, it is helpful if it's in education or in a psychological-based class. Most school systems across the nation require at the master's level for you to have 48 hours. Most classes equal about 3 hours each. So I'm going to be more specific to Georgia, since I know more about Georgia schools. So you're going to be talking about 48 hours, and there is a push that by 2017 that one additional class will be added to the curriculum for school counselors. They must maintain a B average. In some schools, you cannot even graduate with less than 3.25. I got my master's in counseling at Georgia State, and that was the criteria at that time. So if you had a 3.20, you were not moving anywhere. You had to have a 3.25, but some do relax it to 3.0. You also have to have a 3.0 from your undergraduate program to even get into the program. You've been talking briefly about the qualifications of the interns or the quality of counselors once they get to the site. So an intern has to have no less than 700 field hours. I was talking to a counselor yesterday, and she said she, at her program here in Georgia, required 900. So they must have a lot of time on site under a certified school counselor. That counselor has to have been a certified school counselor no less than 3 years, and they have to have been in that particular school no less than 3 years. They cannot be with a neophyte. In addition to all that, they also have to have satisfactorily completed a departmental comprehensive examination and or the national counseling examination. Some schools still have both, where you can take either one. Most of the schools in Georgia are moving away from having their own departmental exit exam. We are gradually moving toward the national counseling examination. It's a little bit more rigorous, but we want to make sure that our students are going to be sort of equalized, no matter whether they stay here in Georgia or they went to Nevada, Arizona, wherever, they would be still qualified nationally to to counsel. There is a huge move, and I'm not sure you know about this, of getting all of the counseling programs under what's called Cacrep Accreditation. This is an independent agency wherein you can elect to be a part of it, and many other programs across the United States are a part of this. And many school systems are not wanting to hire people who are not coming from a Cacrep program, because this indicates that the rigor that you're talking about is actually happening in this program. So I'm very happy to say that at Clark Atlanta University, our master's program is Cacrep accredited. It's a lot of work to get this done, and then it's even more work to maintain it because you're evaluated every 3 to 4 years. But to be competitive, we had to move in this direction. And I dare say that University of West Georgia is Cacrep accredited, Georgia State, UGA is definitely, okay, University of West Georgia as well. So we are right on task with that. Let's talk about counseling courses. Most schools are going to require no less than about 15 to 16 courses. Now that does include the field experience. But let's look at some of these classes, because what I want to impress upon you today is that we are highly qualified. And what we're qualified in, school teachers are not, and neither are the administrators. Introduction to counseling, we're trained to understand what it takes for behavior change in other people. Human relationship skills, this is an area where we learn how to work with people where they are in small groups, large groups, but more importantly, we learn to be effective listeners. Not just hearing a story, but internalizing this story. And so we're trained to be effective listeners. Human growth and development happens to be a course that I teach. So counselors learn about preconception all the way through death. And now that we have to deal with death a lot in our schools, you can see why that's very relevant. But so we understand about left brain training. We understand about right brain training. We understand that the frontal lobe of our youth are not going to be fully developed till they're 30, hopefully. So we understand that. So we understand the family dynamics of students. We understand Piaget. We discuss Brumfer and Brenner's ecological systems. We get that. But the classroom teacher probably doesn't get that. The principal probably is not getting that, but we get that. Then we talk about the theories of counseling. We specifically talk about the grand theories of counseling. So wherein we are not therapists, we do have a background that talks about Freudian psychology. So when we have a student where a teacher might say, well, she talks all day long, we might say in our minds, not out loud, okay, she might be orally fixated. We need to look at how we can work with that. So we don't give a child doom and gloom because they get a report that they're very oral in class. So we talk about theories of counseling. So a good question to ask the counselor is, what is your theoretical orientation? We rarely get asked that professional question. That is a question to ask the counselor. And when a counselor can answer that question for you, then you know you really have a 21st century counselor in front of you. Group counseling. We are well trained to work with 2 students at a time, 6, 8, and 12 students at a time, over a period of lessons that may extend to 6 to 8 weeks. We also are smart enough to know that all students can't work in a group, so we're smart enough to know we have to individually interview students to see if they're eligible for a group. And those that are not, we're smart enough to know that we need to provide individual counseling for those students. However, ASCA is moving towards a more efficient way of counseling, so having group counseling as opposed to individual counseling is going to be our new norm. Career counseling. A lot has been talked about career counseling. But if you really want to know if you have a 21st century counselor in front of you, ask them, well, who is Super? Who is Ginsburg? Who is Holland? Who is Rowe? And speaking of Holland, did you know that the ASVAB assessment for students is based on John Holland's 6 octagon paradigm? Did you realize that? Counselors, we know that. So we have no hesitation in encouraging our students to take this instrument that the military provides for free, because we know what that assessment is going to give us, that we can now work into some lessons in small groups with students. So we're smart in that area. Research and measurement is sort of a generic class that is taught to most graduate students. So we take this a little bit further in our development of our programs, because we want to make our program research-based. When I became a counselor, that was not important. It was just making sure, I was a high school counselor at first, make sure they're in the right class, they're not repeating the class, and parents were happy. But now we're taking it to another level. We want to make our programs research-based. What do I mean when I say that? If I'm going to work with a few students, I need to know, why am I going to work with them? So I'm going to do a needs assessment. Then I want to know, what state are they in prior to my working with them? So I'm going to get a little data there. Then I'm going to come up with an intervention plan to work with them. Then I'm going to monitor it. I'm going to get someone else to help me monitor, which is usually a teacher or a parent. Then we're going to come back and assess it again. Was there any growth? If there was growth, should we continue? If there were no growth acknowledged, should I revise my intervention? So we're smart in that way. Individual and group appraisal is very similar to research and measurement. Oftentimes we do not provide formal assessments of students, but we're smart enough to interpret the ACT and SAT results that come to students, and we can also work with parents on that, and as well as faculty. Counseling diverse population is a must. When I was taking counseling back in the 80s, telling my age now, this was not a course on my program, but it is today, because we are an international global community, and these students are in our school, these families we must serve, and we want to serve. So counselors leave the program knowing how to work with diverse, and in some classes it specifies certain cultures. In human growth and development class, we talk about at least 10 different cultures that are present in our country right now, or should I say families from different type of populations. Right now at Clark Atlanta University, we have over 200 Saudi Arabian students in our school, which is very unique for us, but we are so happy to have that. We've made the necessary accommodations. So even on higher ed, we're making accommodations as it relates to counseling diverse populations. School consultation, we're smart enough to know we can't do it all. Someone mentioned that. The gentleman that was here mentioned that. We're smart enough to know we can't do it all, but we're also smart enough to galvanize other people who can help us with that. And we also know we might have to train other people to help us get the service that students need. So we consider that to be school counseling consultation. Organization, administration, and after we've done all these things, we got to realize one other thing, is that school is a business. We have to realize as much money as we put into them, it is still a business. So we have to be trained on how to run a counseling program. And we cannot come in and have knee-jerk reactions and shoot from the hip. So we are trained to run a program, just like the principal runs at school. We sort of have like a mini school within the school. We are trained to run that school, that program within the school. Professional, ethical, and legal. This is such a hot topic. This has always been in the program. But now counselors are required to take an independent class. Usually we embed it in all our classes, and it still is, but now all schools have a single class that does nothing but professional, ethical, and legal applications for counseling. We actually have this as a part of our exit interview. We ask them really, really specific questions, and we give them scenarios as a what if, how would you handle that? And if we feel like they are not ready, we will not graduate them, because we do not want to have our students in any of the news reports that you recently have heard of. Counseling, practicum 100 hours for our school is usually at the elementary school level, and then for school counseling internship 1 and 2 is usually 300 hours at the middle school level and 300 hours at the high school level. I'm glad to know that when I talked to a certain person in a certain school district, they indicated to me that they have instituted a new plan where a counselor has to attend a special training session to host an intern. I thought, how fabulous is this? Very fabulous. So then you also see where a counselor can take 2 elective courses of their choice, Many of them will select counseling families or counseling high-risk students. So that gives you an overview of the classes. Now, having said all of that, I'm sure you've gotten this on some other venues with the other meetings you had. ASCA has counseling competencies that we must adhere to profess that we're 21st century counselors. And I believe some of these are also going to be a part of the new counselor evaluation instrument in Georgia as well. I won't belabor the point, but if you just look at the bold areas, you can see that it sort of reiterates some of the things I've said already. But the last one is accountability. As school counselors, we have to be accountable. That is really our marketing piece for people to trust in us and to trust their children in us, with us, and to trust the decisions that we make on behalf of the community, the students, and the school. When I was a high school counselor at a certain school with a certain principal, I became inundated with a lot of things. Remember Lucy had the word inundated on her little booth there? And wherein I professed to be the best counselor ever in Georgia at that time, I found that this little illustration was very fruitful with me working with my principal. And so my point is, he was giving me so many things to do that I drew a little stove, and I said, Mr. So-and-so, what you're really doing now is putting your agenda on the front burner, and you're putting school counseling on the back burner. I said this orally to him. He didn't get it. So I decided to draw him a picture. And then I had a paper plate, and I had little pieces of that simulated like food, but it's really a list of all the things he was asking me to do in 1 year. And so I had a conference with him, and he said to me, wow, I had no idea you were doing all these things. He said, I really do need to take something off your plate. I said, yes, and I like to bring some of my things up to the front burner and put some of your things on the back burner. Sounds kind of silly, but it worked. We didn't argue. We didn't fuss and fight. Just something pictorial in a smaller conversation made all the difference. And I tell you, I still hold him as the best principal I've ever had. Because of the discrepancies, and some people have talked a bit about this before, I'm sure, that counselors are trained. You saw all the things that I mentioned to you about how they're highly trained, the competencies that they have to adhere to, but yet we are still not able to deliver the kind of 21st century counseling programs that we feel we need to deliver. So after hearing this for so many years, I decided to write a book, which I will give you each a complimentary copy after this. And the name of it is, as you see, is When School Counseling Hurts, A Call for Advocacy. And I chose this topic because when we're not in the lane that we were educated to be in, and we're forced to be in other lanes, it's like we're going to have a collision on 285 or collision on 75, because that's what happens, and the program dies. It hurts. But more importantly, our students hurt because they're not getting the kind of service that they need. And they are our jewels. They're our purpose for being in the profession in the beginning. Some of us could have been classroom teachers forever or somewhere else, but we chose to be here. So we want to make sure that you understand that things have to happen differently in Georgia so that school counselors can do their job. I often wonder, what would school be like if we were in our lane, we were in our professional lane? And so I asked myself this. I said, Crystal, does anybody ask the English teacher to teach math? Does anybody ask the math teacher to teach PE? Does the PE teacher ever teach art? And I say to myself, almost never. So teachers are allowed, in my opinion, to remain in their professional lane, so our kids get the most from them. But for the school counselor, it's like we're all over the place in some schools. I must admit, it is not the case in some schools. Some schools, I could name a lot of them because my interns are in some of them right now. They are awesome. They are doing what you all would love and understand to be 21st century counseling. But I have to also say, those are almost exceptions to the rule. They're not the rule. So school counseling hurts when that does not happen. Here is a list that ASCA gave me permission to print in my book that distinguish between some of the appropriate and inappropriate activities for school counselors. I submit this to you because in my recommendation, I think you will understand that it's important that you have a copy of this if you don't have it already. As I got this little verbiage from one of my past counselor coordinators, school counselors are uniquely qualified and trained to maximize the full potential of students. I hope that this brief mini presentation to you has encouraged you to see that we are qualified. It's not that we're not qualified. We are qualified. Some of us hold advanced degrees such as a specialist or PhD in school counseling, so we are more than qualified to do our jobs. We just need to be able to stay in our lane. So, my counseling recommendations is continue doing what you're doing in your way to advocate for the school counseling profession. But here's what I say more specifically. Principals, administrators, they need to know who we are. Of course, we've tried to make ourselves known to them. But I have to tell you, if you do that too hardly, too boldly, you rock that boat, you'll be out of the boat. So our school counselors, most of them are just not going to push that button too hard. They're going to proceed very gently. So we need some people in authority that can help us in that role. And when you read my book, I think you will understand more specifically where I'm coming from with this. But I think that is the single most thing that's getting us off our lane, because I don't want to say that they're mean. I don't think they're mean. I think they just don't understand. And for some of them, we'll extra pair of hands in the building that they can use to do whatever. I looked at the job description that a lot of the school systems have across Georgia, and they have the correct job description for school counselors. When you get down to the very bottom, I see this: other duties as assigned. I'm here to tell you, our counselor can spend 80% of every day doing other duties as assigned. It's got to stop. Support counsel planning time. In most schools, teachers have anywhere from 45 to 90 minutes a day to plan. Guess how many the counselor has? None. It's almost like we come in on roller skates. Many of us don't even eat lunch. And if you're like me, first one in, last one leave. So my day sometime was 77, 76. Don't let it be a basketball game. I'm gonna counsel during halftime, because that's when I can get my students. Wherever they are, I'm there. And other counselors that same way. So when do we plan our day? Someone has already mentioned reduced counsel-student ratio, so I won't belabor that point. I think a professional 21st century ASCA-bound aligned counseling program ought to be mandated in Georgia. It should be the thing, not the exception. It should not be optional. Principal doesn't get to make that decision. I can't be used to provide lessons so that all the first grade teachers can have a common planning time. That's not what I went to school to do. So I'm asking for either elimination or reduction in non-counseling duties. I'm not crazy. After 38 years in the school system, I do realize there's some things we must do that's not counseling. But again, 20% to 25% is where that should be. I think North Carolina is renowned now for moving in that direction, where it's mandated that counselors have to spend 80% of their time directly involved with students, and then 20% time they can have indirect involvement with students. And someone else talked about counselor training. I don't know where the money's going to come from. Maybe we can get donations from Arthur Blank. I don't know. But we need to fund counselor training. And the reason I say this is because the veterans that are there, they need help to become a 21st century counselor. They need help. So when I put an intern under the supervision of someone that's got 25 years under their belt, and perhaps they've never been to an ASPA conference and maybe 2 GSCA conferences, then I have a lot more work to do with my intern. I let them stay there because that's where they're assigned, but then I also have to pull them to go shadow other counselors who are 21st century counselors. Because if we don't do that, then who's going to train the students with 21st century counseling? The ones that are graduating in the last 10 years, they're good, but it's not enough of them for all the field students that we need for the state of Georgia, so we do need some funding there. That's what I have for you today. If you have some questions for me.
Chairman Nix.
You get away without a question.
Of course not.
Mr. Hill had mentioned this, and you mentioned this too. How do we, how can we have an effective training program for those administrators as to how to use the services of a counselor? And maybe another question with that, I don't know whether you would know this, but what do they get in their training programs now as to how they should interact with the counselor, what the counselor's role would be? Do you that may not be something that you can answer, but what are your thoughts?
Well, the
please?
second part first. Presently, there is nothing in the leadership program that addresses the counselors. It's just not. Even in our school, and we're on the same floor, it is not there. We've had many discussions about maybe counselors should take one administrative courses or leadership classes, and one class, and then vice versa. They should take one of ours. Not sure that would solve the problem. But I think at the, and ensure something should happen at the higher ed. And there are many ways that can be done. And maybe the exchange of one class here and there across the lines would be good. But at the end of the day, I think the school system can make that happen better. Because simply just having some dialogues and some guidelines. Because as a counselor, I'm going to do what the principal says most of the time. I say that. But then the principal is going to do what his supervisor says. So if your supervisor says we're going to do 80-20 ratio with time spent with students, that's what it's going to be. But no one is saying that. So I think some dialogue would be grateful, and then some accountability about that would happen. But I think on a district level would far exceed any classes that might be taken.
Okay.
I do speak to leadership classes about counselors on our campus. I don't know if that happens elsewhere. And so I try to make sure they have some understanding. And I always take them to ASCA, because one of the things they want to know is, how do you know you got a good counselor, and what questions do you ask counselors? I said, well, have you ever been to the ASCA website? They were like, okay, what is ASCA? I'm like, wow, you don't know what ASCA is? Okay. But then there are probably some people that don't know what NASPA is either, right? So, but I think, yeah, something needs to happen in higher ed, but then I also think something needs to happen per district with those people in leadership there.
And I wonder if there's if there's any way when the superintendents have their annual meetings or whatever, have y'all ever asked to be part of their agenda to speak to them about what you do, and have they rejected you, or have they let you in, and what's happened there?
My experience is that we have had conversations, and I just lay it out here. When I was in Atlanta, I was the president of Atlanta School Counsel Association for 4 years. And that the person that was superintendent at the time was very gracious to speak with us. Gave us a nod, agreed. You're right on. I understand. This makes good sense to me. And that's as far as it went. There were some principals that heard of that conversation and made some small changes, but it kind of faded away because there's no accountability. There's nobody to give leadership to it above the school level. If it's no leadership above the school level, it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. The principal's going to go back to running the school the way they run. They'll tell you it's their ship, so they're going to steer the ship. So we need help in that regard, because otherwise we're fighting with the principal, and we don't want to be there. It's not a good, I promise you, it's just not a good place to be. We need help in that area.
Thank you.
Dr. Giddens, would you allow Matthew Gamble, GSCA's lobbyist, to just add something quickly?
Sure.
And you stay, because I think
Absolutely.
there's another question for
Okay.
you, but I sense that he had something to say.
Well, basically, the question, have we gotten in front of the School Superintendents Association, and we have worked with John Zahner to go and present.
Talk in the mic, Matthew, please.
We've gone to the Georgia School Counselors Association and presented. We've gone to the Gale organization and presented every year at the Gale Summer Conference, which is the principals group. Well, primarily the principals group, for the past 3 years. And so there's been receptiveness to hearing this, but the problem is, 180 systems, and then however many administrators, and you go on and on with such a large audience, that it just hasn't been possible for us to get, you know, a captive audience, a consistent message. But we've definitely been trying, and we've been well received. But I hope that answers your question. And that's the School Counselors, Georgia School Counselors Association.
Representative Gazaway.
Thank you. First of all, it's excellent presentation.
Well, thank you.
On the 80-20 that you mentioned, North Carolina, is that something they've implemented via legislation?
It is.
And
I actually brought the article. I think Gail Smith was instrumental in getting it out. That it's actually in here. So it was some legislation that was done to bring that about.
okay, I can follow up with you afterwards on that.
Okay.
But in our current theme of system flexibility, is there a way to make that, as a state, we seem to want to allow these systems to have flexibility. It seems like the flexibility is flexing the counselors
Yes.
more than anything. Is there a way that we can make that work? You know, a state initiative. I'm thinking out loud because I think that's the nut of the problem that we've got here, and the reason we're here today is that our flexibility and our economic distress throughout our state has brought us to our knees here. As far as our counselors, I have, if not the worst in the state, density-wise, some of the worst in my district, and by all accounts, we've got to do better. And I just wonder, can we mandate it, and then they start saying, we need more money, y'all are taking away our flexibility, and so we're kind of caught in the middle here. How do we do it? But thank you again, that was really, really good. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Giddens. We appreciate your comments and your being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
And now we're going to somewhat go full circle for a few minutes before our school superintendent arrives. And you remember our first meeting, we had counselors from around the state talking about what it was like to be a counselor in her district. And afterwards I was told, but you left out one area. And I said, well, what was that area? And I was told it was the Atlanta Public Schools, because their situation is different in many ways. And so I've asked Sonia Wright to speak to us a few minutes. Sonia is a counselor at, Sonia, if you'll share that with us, and a little bit about your background, please.
Okay. I am a school counselor at Sylvan Hills Middle School in the city of Atlanta, and I have been an elementary school counselor, previously a middle school counselor, and a high school counselor. So I've worked on all three levels. But today I will talk with you about the school counseling program at my current school, and I can share information just in general about some of my other experiences as a school counselor. I started out working in Henry County, but I have spent most of my years in Atlanta as a school counselor, working on all three levels. This is my first year at Sylvan Hills Middle School, and the last 2 years I served as an elementary counselor in APS, and I went between two elementary schools. But this year, as in all other years, we started with a needs assessment. And the needs assessment was given to our students, faculty and staff members, as well as parents. And generally what we do with the needs assessment is we ask a series of questions about services that the school counselor provides and whether or not those services are important, very important, or not important at all. And as you could see on the previous slide and in your handout, the majority of those that took the survey felt that the school counseling services that they were being asked about were very important. We asked about individual counseling, whether that was of value in terms of how school counselors should spend their time, group counseling, group guidance, individual guidance. We asked about doing registration. They did not think that was something that was very important for school counselors to spend time doing. But the school counseling program is developed and established based on the data that is pulled from a combination of resources. The needs assessment that is done at the very beginning of the school year, our attendance data, discipline data, grades, benchmark assessments that students take during different intervals of the school year. And the initial benchmark assessment is taken at the very beginning of the school year before we begin, and there is a benchmark assessment given every 9 weeks throughout the school year until the very end, and career assessments. So we pull all of that data and determine the needs of our students and put our school counseling program together. The school counseling program is standards-based, and in addition to building a program that is standards-based, we also look at the school plan and make a connection with the needs of the school based on the school plan and how we develop our school counseling program. The program is comprehensive, and school counseling services are provided to all students. So the services that we offer, the guidance that is offered to all students, not a select group of students, but it is offered to all students in all grade levels. Currently, I am the counselor for 6th grade and half of 7th grade. There is another counselor that works with me, and she services half of 7th grade and all of 8th grade. The school counseling program focuses on 3 primary areas of development: personal development, social development, and academic development. And everything that we do in our school counseling program is going to focus on one or some combination of these 3 areas of development. All of our programs, all of the services that we provide. These are just some of the duties and responsibilities that I personally have currently as a school counselor. And I won't read all of them. You guys have the handout. Individual counseling, small group counseling, guidance, classroom guidance, being a part of the RTI team and the crisis team that's locally based at the school, student services team member, implementing and actually carrying out the CCRPI career assessments and activities that are required through the bridge law with students now that are in middle school. Some additional counseling-related programs that we implement at Sylvan include Red Ribbon Week, which is Drug-Free Schools Week, which is always the last week in October. And we plan a number of different initiatives basically designed to educate students about the dangers of drugs and alcohol and to encourage them to live healthy lifestyles. We have an anti-bullying initiative in which, again, we provide a program that teaches students about bullying, the dangers of bullying. We talk with them about the law that's connected to bullying, the policies that are in place for the school system. We talk a lot about having empathy and showing respect for your classmates. for yourself, and just being considerate and in general a kind person. College and Career Motivation Week is a district-wide initiative that was designed several years ago, and the initiative is designed to help to make students aware of their post-secondary options and to make them aware of career options that are available to them, all the options that are available, and the kinds of things that they need to do in order to pursue various options that are available. So during this particular week, every day we plan activities that are educational for students. Some of the activities we actually implement, like classroom guidance. We have a guidance schedule that we're going to carry out during the week and go into the classrooms and implement lessons that are related to college and career exploration and education for middle school students. We are going to have a scavenger hunt just to help them to become aware of some of the experiences that their teachers have had, majors that their teachers chose, different activities that their teachers were involved in. So it's the whole week is very educational, and all of the activities are designed to help students to learn about college and career readiness. The final activity for the week is Career Day. On Career Day, we invite a variety of different speakers to come in and talk about their careers and the types of things that they had to do in order to pursue the careers that they currently hold. Our advisement program is currently the Social Emotional Learning Program, and it is an initiative that was established by our superintendent this year. And for those of you that may not be aware of social emotional learning in a formal sense, it basically involves teaching students about communicating more effectively, showing more compassion, being respectful, and making better decisions on a day-to-day basis. So the program teaches skills for life. And each adult that's in the building is assigned to a small group of students. We meet once a week, and the advisees and advisors come together and they have a lesson that is planned. We have a curriculum that has been adopted for our social emotional learning program, and that curriculum is the second step program. All of the lessons begin with a greeting. There is an opportunity for students to share. They transition into the activity or the lesson, and there's always a closing. All of the lessons begin in a circle and they end in a circle. And the general premise behind the advisement program, the Teachers as Advisement program, is to provide each student in the school with a caring adult that will help to provide guidance and support for them. So during that 45-minute window of time, every Monday from 9:15 until 10 o'clock, your teacher is not your math teacher or your art teacher anymore. They're your advisor. They're the person that you make a connection with, and you know that they care about you, and they provide information for you that's going to help you to grow and develop, and it's a really good program. Another program that we have are transitional programs that help students to transition from elementary to middle school and from middle school to high school. So there's a series of activities that we engage students in. It could be classroom guidance lessons, visits from us going to the elementary schools that are going to feed into us to provide a program about what fifth graders can expect when they come to middle school to help them to be able to transition more smoothly. Or it could involve high schools coming over to visit us for the same purpose. We do some classroom lessons, classroom guidance lessons to support that initiative as well. We are going to do a college campus tour this year. As a district, we have adopted the No Place for Hate initiative. So I know that all of our middle schools are working towards becoming No Place for Hate schools. We do a lot of peer mediation. Our goal is to have a peer mediation program at the school. We don't currently have one, but our long-term goal is to actually implement a program. Right now, we are mostly mediating situations, but our goal is to teach students the skills of conflict resolution and mediation, and they can eventually begin to help each other to resolve conflicts and situations that come up. We do have a new student orientation program. So as students enroll in school, as a counselor, we handle walk-in scheduling. We don't do the enrollment at my school, but we do walk-in scheduling, which means after they have been enrolled in the main office with their parents, they come back and see us, and we actually assign them a schedule and give them their classes. And while that is happening, we give them an orientation of the school and help them to understand what to expect and what the expectations are of the school, and just help them to kind of understand the new environment that they're entering into. Counselor and student lunch buddies. That is an initiative that we do mostly with our groups. I know that my group that is meeting now, we meet during lunchtime. And that's just so that students are not pulled away from instructional time. Initially, we designated their connections classes, which are the PE classes, art, band, chorus. They don't want to be out of those classes. So we shifted to doing lunch buddies so that the groups can meet during lunchtime. We talked about the social emotional learning program. Some of the benefits of social emotional learning is that learning these skills helps students to increase the graduation rate. It increases college attendance, and college attendance could be attending a 2-year college, a 4-year college, or any vocational program, any type of educational program beyond high school, an increase in viable employment, and an improvement in your emotional health. And we all know how important it is to be able to control your impulses in a professional setting in order to be able to maintain relationships in a work setting. It has been proven through research to decrease criminal activity and adult risky behaviors. And these are some of the core competencies of the social emotional learning program. Helps with self-management. The curriculum that we've adopted addresses all of these areas: social awareness, self-awareness, responsible decision-making, and relationship skills. As a school counselor, I am a part of a team that is providing services for students at my school who have potentially been impacted by the 2009 CRCT irregularities. And there are 3 components of the services that those students receive. There's an educational component, support services, and an establishment of goals and objectives based on those students' individual needs. But as a counselor, as counselors in the school, we primarily provide support services. So it's based on the students' individual needs. Currently, we have one group that is running now, a conflict resolution group, but in our plan for the school year, our plan includes conflict resolution groups for both semesters, an attendance group, and study skills groups. And again, these groups are planned for us this school year based on the needs of our students and based on what the data indicated that our students' needs were. We are also providing group guidance, and group guidance is a little different from group counseling in that group counseling services generally is composed of anywhere from 6 to 8 students that are meeting on a regular basis, and we meet every week with the conflict resolution groups. But group guidance allows you to meet with a larger number of students in order to share important information, again, that is standards-based, based on national standards established by the American School Counselors Association. And our group guidance that we have planned for this school year includes study skills, organization skills, goal setting, career exploration, and bullying and harassment. And at this current time, we have done group guidance in the area of career exploration and bullying and harassment, but we will cover all of these areas this school year through our guidance plan. These are some of the committees that I'm a part of as a counselor in the school: the advisory council, the administrative team, the leadership team, the social emotional learning district-wide team, the social emotional learning school team, the advisory committee, the attendance committee, and the Target 2021 committee at the school. These are some of the other duties that have been assigned to me this year, and I put them in red because they don't connect to national standards for counselors. Walk-in scheduling, which again involves us assigning classes to students after they enroll in the front office. We have a morning duty, transitions duty, in which transitions duty involves us going into the hall each time there's a transition. So each time classes change, we go into the hall to help to monitor the halls. Afternoon duty, daily observations, and the printing report cards and progress reports and distributing those. Those are some of the other duties that we have. My recommendation is that there be legislation established that would require ASCA standards to be implemented in schools with school counselors. In my opinion, that is probably going to be the most profound way for us to transition into all counselors being able to establish a school counseling program that is based on national standards and not having to negotiate constantly about non-counseling duties, and not having circumstances or counseling programs to look different from building to building based upon the decision or the perception of the administrator about how your time should be spent. So for that reason, that is my recommendation, that we establish legislation. Also, it's been mentioned before, but I do think it is important to have coursework that is required in leadership programs that help educational leaders to understand the role of a school counselor as it relates to implementing national standards, and what it means to have a school counseling program that is based on data, that meets the needs of all students, that services all students, that's standards-based, that can be implemented in the school so that all students will have the benefit of having a school counseling program based on national standards, as opposed to it being just at random based on individual decisions that are made by school administrators.
Do we have any questions? That was very thorough. As you walk away, may I just ask you this? How many students do you serve?
I serve almost 300 students. As the sixth grade counselor, there are a little more than 200 students on sixth grade. Seventh grade has a little less than 200, and we divide seventh grade, so about 300 students. Now, I would say in terms of what happens for school counselors in the Atlanta public school system, because I have serviced a number of different schools, I have worked on all three levels. It always depends on the school administrator and how they choose to have you to spend your time. So quite a number of my colleagues are doing registration, and registration is very time consuming. So in addition to building schedules, they're doing registration records. That's something that we don't do at my current school. I have done records before. It is very time consuming, and those non-counseling duties, those two duties alone can cause you not to be able to implement a school counseling program because of the amount of time that you have to spend to carry out those tasks. And if you are the person that is registering students as they walk in, students don't have appointments when they come in to register with their parents. Quite a number of our students are very transient, so it is ongoing. It becomes a revolving door. So those are two of the, I would say, the primary non-counseling duties that cause counselors to not be able to establish a program. It is not that counselors are not trained. They are trained, highly qualified to implement a school counseling program based on national standards. The school counseling programs are Cacrep accredited, that they've gone through, but in terms of how you spend your time, that is totally based on your school administrator.
Thank you so much. You've given us a lot of information, and we appreciate it. And now we're so pleased to have our school superintendent with us. We appreciate Superintendent Woods taking his valuable time to come and be with us, and we certainly want to honor his time. And Superintendent Woods, you can sit if you want to, or stand, whichever you're more comfortable doing.
Well, I'll just stand. I've been sitting for quite a while with I don't know, about 50 high school students over in the West Tower, I think. So this will get a good chance. But I do appreciate the time, and again, for you on this subcommittee, and again, what it does mean. I mean, counseling for me has been something that I've been involved with in education for, I guess, all 22 years. It's something either as a high school social studies teacher or an administrator that I was able to, participate in. I give kudos to really the work of individuals that I work with. I think Miss Ashley, Miss Griggs, Miss Janice Carlisle, but especially Miss Mary Broadhurst, who, a lady I loved and really was just an individual that really helped, train me. It was one of my mentors as a young teacher at Irwin County. And, I think today that what we look at in counseling, it is something that in all professions and in all aspects of education, we're looking at what is the role of a counselor. It is a role that I think has definitely expanded across the board.
Part of it has become, a reduction in force. One of the things I looked at as an administrator in Irwin County when I first started, we had 2, and that was 2 administrators or 2 counselors for roughly about 750 students. By the time I left, we were down to 1 per 700 students. And I think today, of course, on average within the state, we have 1 counselor per 500, students. So you're still looking at what are the jobs and responsibilities that are there. I think, as you recently heard, there are a lot of jobs that are definitely, asked. I would say that's probably true of any part of the profession. Being an administrator, I think my job description didn't say I was to go down and, and serve lunch, put on a hairnet. But, with these young, people that we look at and with the roles of the counselors, they are definitely taxed. I think they are being stretched, more and more and day with things that we're being asked. I think from a high school level, middle school level, we've looked at, move on when ready. We looked at dual enrollment. This is another layer of administration that we have to look at. It is an important layer of administration because we are trying to give advice to young people as far as what does a career, what does a pathway, what does an educational option look like. And, and I think that, how do we address that? How do we make sure that we are giving these students and parents the best advice that we possibly can? And I think that's something we've got to look at, overall. And I understand that we work, within a, as far as a balanced budget. We only have X amount of dollars, and it means trying to use that to the fullest. And so, I think we have to make a decision. Does this mean that we put, more boots on the ground, more more counselors, there that deal with and reduce the number of caseloads that they have to deal with individually, or is there another way in which we can address that? One of the things that I would probably look at is that I think we have to look and talk with our higher ed, partners. I think, we have counselors that are, are advisors that come out of the technical school system, the university school system. These are individuals we need to look at. Can technology play a part? I think one of the things is, looking at with our, student finance division, with Tricia Chastain and, what goes on there. I mean, the Georgia Futures, or what we know as, I guess, Georgia 411, that is something that I think where technology can be of a great benefit, to put something online that allows us to download the courses that are being taken so that our parents and our students, perhaps they can look at this at home and do some things in which, that really can solve some of this. And I think that is something using technology or leveraging technology to the fullest. But again, it has to be something that is administered correct. I've been around and I've seen a lot of technology. And some of the technology is great and some of it is not so great. So it is, what we have to look at has to make sure it can do the job, that it is not shortchanging anything that we do. Looking at the roles of counselors, I would agree again what is shared that many of the counselors do deal with testing. That is one of the things that we have seen, and we have seen an increase in testing across the state. We think about our student learning objectives. Again, this is something that again I've had questions with, but that being said, it puts a lot of stress on our counseling profession because many of these individuals have to go out and they either help coordinate the test or they administer the test or both. And so those are things that take time and time away from what goes on within schools daily. Being said, that's kind of the superficial role of what counseling does, but also there are a lot of things that go on beyond that. Again, and one of the things we have looked at within our strategic plan is school environment. And counselors have a very important role in dealing with school environment. Because again, it's not like Las Vegas, because what happens in home does not stay at home. It comes to school. And what many of the times of what we deal with, and again, my own personal, relationship with counselors, that was an important job. Because before a student thinks about taking a test, before they think about what they want to become, they have to be emotionally, and academically, mentally ready to participate in school. And so some of the best things that a counselor does is just give a kid a hug, to spend some time with them. And I think that they're, again, looking at, if we are not increasing the number of individuals that we have, I think we have to start, erasing some of the barriers barriers between agencies. If it's something we deal with our nursing profession, perhaps that is something that can help out, and with that, with mental health, maybe that is another group, or the health centers that we have. There are other avenues that we've looked at. Again, I'm not suggesting this is good or bad, but if we don't increase the amount of personnel we have, then we have to look at alternatives to say what can we do to provide some relief. Because I guarantee you that with 1 in 500, that's just the average. Okay, but I know in places that sometimes it is one counselor, K-12. It is one counselor. In fact, I was at a school in Southwest Georgia where one counselor was serving both high school and middle school, and that was over 700 individuals that we've looked at. And one of the trends I have seen, especially even in the area of media specialists, that now with school systems are trying to cut back and have a parapro serving that role. And so what does this mean? Are there other individuals that can be perhaps brought on board that can help in this area to cut back on some of the demands? So that's really the question at hand. We know that there is an issue. We know there are problems. But what avenue are we going? I mean, either we decide to put more people in place, which of course deals with a funding issue, or we look at other solutions that are viable and does not shortchange the profession at all. And so those are some things that we are looking at. But as I shared, this is an extremely valuable profession. It is something that is a very critical component, and probably they do not get the recognition because they are not a tested subject. What we have found out is sometimes across the state, and when we look at individuals, we look at school systems, and I think that what has happened to the profession, because they are not tested, because they are not part of the CCRPI model, that some of the things they do is they get pushed to the side, and they begin to take on some of these duties that are out there. Again, I'm not complaining, because teachers and educators, we do a lot of duties that, like I said, that our contract says. And in fact, probably if you go to the very bottom of the contract, it says, one of the final things is that other duties as assigned by. Okay, so that means that this, what we may say that we have a set of standards, but the reality is that sometimes we all have to pitch in and do what we need to do. But we need to make sure that we are not shortchanging, this staff, because they do a lot of work, and they definitely come to work every day. And I think in many cases they have probably went above and beyond what is expected of anyone, because it is a tough job. It is a tough job, especially at the K-5 area. When you look at a kid who was, mom and dad, they've had, a shooting or something, or some violent crime, at the house. We've had the police show up or something of this nature, or either the kids have not had a good meal. And so those are things that we're trying to look at to get these kids ready. And again, this is what these individuals deal with. We've looked at recent legislation that really has increased and compounded their roles and responsibilities. We talk about bullying in school. Well, one of the individuals that are in charge of bullying in school, or whether it's PBIS, typically whether it's coordinating or actually hands-on, these are counselors. We have now recently had a new piece of legislation that deals with suicide in school. Well, this is the individuals that are going to be dealing with that. And so if we keep putting more and more legislation on individuals, you can only do so much. And so what will take place, either it will not get done, or you will create a system that will collapse upon itself and really, have something that does not benefit anyone. And so we do not want to make sure, one of the things we do not want to make sure that we do is that we sacrifice quality. I think quality is extremely important to what we're doing in our schools. And, and I think that there again, what we are trying to look at, and again, what I would suggest is that, perhaps we need to take an inventory of what our resources are. What can we actually do? What is the capacity that we have? Different school systems, offer different things. And again, one of the individuals that I was, young people I was talking with over at the tower, they talked about, equity, that rural school systems suffer, because they just don't have the financial resources. And again, that is something to look at. And again, I think that we necessarily can't put one system completely in the same box as the other. And I think that's one of the things we have probably miscalculated in education, is that we tried to put a one-size-fits-all. And so there has to be flexibility within the system. And if it comes down to legislation, I would recommend please don't make the legislation so rigid that we can't make changes that we need. Because once, all of you go home, we don't see you for a year. And that's something that, that we have to look at. But if it's something that we need to do at the department, with working with the Board of Education to make policy, then policy may be the way that we need to go. And that's where I think we need to continue on our dialogue to reach out and say, what is the best way? What is best, for, the 1.7 million children in Georgia? And how do we allow our counseling staff to reach them? And so there are, a lot of great things that are out there. But, I want to say, that, really in closing, I don't want to just keep running off, with words, but, our counselors are a very valuable, group of individuals. They serve many hats. They serve hats that sometimes that even deal with, within the legal system. They may be our liaison with DJJ. That's, something else that they deal with. And so it's trying to find out what can we do. We look at our GNETS program. That's probably an area that counselors have to deal with as well. And so, it is something we have to look at. But I think, we need to make sure that we have a good, thorough inventory of AR capacity, what we can do, what they're being asked to do, and say that in reality, is it something that the existing work staff can perform? If it can't, then, there again, I think we have to look at. But I do want to assure you that we need to look at, and I will be looking at other resources. Because I think, for us, and one of the things I have found out, and what I've encouraged at, the DOE itself, is that we have to remove the silos that perhaps prevent us from, making the right decisions, or perhaps, create a very rigid system, of service for us. Reaching out to other agencies, reaching out to higher ed. These are, places where I think with Move On with Ready and Dual Enrollment, I mean, they have an equal amount of skin in the game, to say the least, because it is important, because we want to make sure that our kids succeed. And we have to know what success looks like, or what's going to assure them to do that. But also, I think the emotional part of our children, because before they even, begin to crack a book, they have to emotionally be ready to learn. And that's why that is a very key pillar in our strategic plan, is the school environment aspect, and that includes a lot of things. So at this time, I will kind of close. You've heard my statement. I think we've had a letter that was presented to each of you with that, but I'll entertain any questions you have at this time, and if not, I will gladly step away.
You do have a question.
Okay, sure.
Chairman Nix.
Yes. Thank you for coming to address the issue.
You touched on something that I had wondered about. Do you think there's any way through the department and through the board that there could be some policy made to help with this? I don't think it would be a good idea to try to do legislation to do this, but would there be some way to create some type of policy that would maybe reward principals who more effectively use their counselors? And I know that's very vague thinking, but is that an area we might be able to look at? I think from what I keep hearing from the counselors, their relationship with the principal is so critical, and it's obvious due to his using resources as he or she feels is best, that they're not getting to do what they do best. Do you think that's something that we might be able to look into, or you might be able to look into, and see if we could come up with something that would help with that?
Yes, right. Again, with our College and Career Readiness Performance Index, or what we acronym, I guess, CCRPI, again, that is one area in which we can, I think that a lot of it is, it's not necessarily reward based, but I think that there are parts of that in which we can put that in place, that say that for schools that go above and beyond, that have this out there, so that if you utilize a counselor in X way, then you'll be rewarded for that. I think that gives them incentive points to bring that up. Of course, right now we know, even with the Opportunity School District, possibility of the future, we're looking at 60 as being the magic number. Well, I think for myself, and one of the things we have looked at is trying to give our school systems a menu of options that would reward, good, proactive, decision making on their part. And this would be, I think, one area that definitely could be used in that. It could even be, looking at teacher evaluation in some form that we look at. I know we've talked at trying to maybe augment that and add a professional development piece. And that would be something that rewards, I guess, the creativity and innovation of our counselors, but also our administrators working hand in hand. So there are several options there that we definitely could explore and put in place. And I think that, following even recommendations that you would have as well. And I think we can definitely work together to make that a very real possibility.
Okay. Thank you.
Chairman Hawkins.
Good to see you again. See you
Thanks,
quite
sir.
often in Hall County. I just want to deviate just a little bit, but before I do, I want to thank you for coming, and I think Representative Nix has a really good idea. I like the idea of rewarding. I think gets people moving in a positive way. I've learned a lot about counselors and learn every day. A lot of appreciation for what you do, and I really hope we can work together to help these folks. And I agree with you, the more legislation we sometimes get to, it does bind, and we sometimes inadvertently go the wrong way and then found out later that we didn't help as much. But the thing I want to just touch on is the media specialist too.
Okay.
My sister is one, and I hear from her all the time. And I'll tell you, I have no training in any direction with computers. I know how to turn them on and turn them off, and I have been hampered in my job as a legislator and a dentist. And she's doing a PowerPoint for me that I'm presenting to a group next Thursday. So I would just say I hope that this is the future, and I hope that we can also help those folks. Because boy, I tell you, if our kids don't get it in high school, those that do not go to college and those that do not even go to technical schools, they're never going to have it, and they're going to be like me, and they're going to be behind the curve. And it's not fun to be behind the curve in anything. So thank you for what you do, though. Appreciate it.
Right, thank you. And again, I would just kind of follow up with the media specialist. I mean, I know this is not the subcommittee to address that, but it is another area. And I guess my thing being is I've seen where school systems with that are being forced, to really have individuals that were not trained, but more in the line of paraprofessionals taking that role. And I think that's where I would advise not going down the path of utilizing individuals who are not trained, because whether it's media specialists or counselors, I mean, that's a highly technical field. I mean, they don't get the glitz of what goes on in school, but they are very important to the academic success and really the overall environment of what's going on. And so, but our pledge is to work with each and every one of you to make sure it does happen, so that we can be successful, because it is important. And like that, our counselors do a tremendous job. And there again, I go back to Mary Broadhurst, and I can't say enough that with one individual that probably has impacted me more than anyone outside of my field was Ms. Broadhurst. But I could tell you, if I had the kids that came in and that were served and worked, and she had an impact, we couldn't fill this building, not just this room, but we couldn't fill this building because Mary had an impact across the state, and very, very dear lady.
And one more question.
Sure.
Representative Gazel.
Superintendent, thank you for being with us. We've had sort of some education-related initiatives recently that were some ideas from Tennessee and ideas from Louisiana. And then our last meeting, we had someone say that we were looking at Alabama and South Carolina. I'm sort of hoping, and I know you have a national perspective and attend conferences, what in this subject area have you seen nationally, maybe from some more progressive states? We heard about maybe North Carolina. I know that, as I've mentioned, I may represent, sounds like, probably the most challenged counselor to student ratio district in the whole state of Georgia. But, and so maybe I'm coming at this with a much more concerned perspective than some other areas of the state. But what, if anything, have you seen nationally that works to solve this specific problem?
Well, I think nationally, again, looking at a common set of standards, I think had at least some unity there. I mean, it gives you some direction, because right now, it's all over the board with that. And so I think having at least a perspective of saying that these are at least some things that we could look at. Now, whether this is a complete national standards that we look at, I don't know. Because ultimately, I think that what I've tried to focus on is that really, I think for us, our solution was really going to the counselors, of Georgia. I mean, they know what the issues are that they face. I mean, we can talk about the other states, but other states have different demographics. They have different needs that we have. And so I think that what we have found is that that the individuals of the states that are on the progressive end is that they've listened to the people that are they're serving, and I think that's would be a best start for us.
Let me be more specific, because
Okay.
I've done that.
Okay.
From your position as state school superintendent and other people around the country, making this legislation, state school superintendent legislature, trickling down to the counties, what mechanism works? We're hearing everybody say, oh, well, we want to keep our flexibility, but a lot of times that translates into doing nothing. I mean, I'm just trying to be real here. What states have been able to make this work and get out of the problem that we're in? And they may be better able to answer this, but from a policy standpoint, you're going to be a critical part of this. So we actually do something.
Well, I guess the one state that at least in my circle that has heard, I mean, Alabama seems to be making some strides, and I think we had talked. I'm not sure if I talked with Merrill, but with someone within the staff. That was when the other day we were talking about that.
Can I use the talking
sure.
point that we're behind
Okay.
Alabama? Would that be?
Well, I would
Can
say
I go on the radio and say we're behind Alabama? We got to do something.
Well, I don't know that necessarily we're behind Alabama, because I want to make sure Alabama's doing the right thing. But I think it is trying to see what is out there. I think that that looking at the national standards is and it may be that some of the states have implemented some parts of that, have been very progressive. But I would say that probably if that is the case. Because I will claim not to be an expert in this area, especially
I understand.
with that.
I'm really questioning you not on the details, but on the bigger picture of.
Well, to get again with the big picture out, I mean, in words that I've heard, Alabama seems to have taken at least some interest in this area. They have been more aggressive in this area. Now, have they arrived? I don't know that I could say that, but I think that they have put it on the radar. And since putting on the radar, then that means that they're very active with it. And I would there again it looks at from a national standpoint, what we're looking at, it just comes down to priority. Is this important? And I think that which I applaud the work that's being done, because I think it is an area that has gone grossly neglected over the years, especially since with the arrival of No Child Left Behind. So much of what education. A lot. I mean, whether it's media center, whether it's we're talking about counselors or fine arts. There are things that we basically have pushed off to the side, and so I think right now it is trying to determine what will that look like. And Alabama does seem to be a little bit leading the way right now, but there again I'll defer back to our counselors because I don't want to misspeak with that. But that's what I'm hearing across the nation.
Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Thank you so much for your time and being with us. We really do appreciate it. And we appreciate the support that you give counseling in Georgia.
It's an important part. I mean, we're a team. And it requires all parts, and this is a vital portion of our team. But again, on behalf of myself and the DOE, if we could be of service, please do not hesitate to call or contact us. We'll be glad to serve in any way, and I think we look forward to working with the Board of Education and perhaps creating some policy that will definitely support this area of our program. Okay, thank you very much.
And thank you again. We are going to go now and hear from Nicole Weber, who is a counselor in Cobb. And Nicole, I believe I have this right, that you were the 2012 ASCA Counselor of the Year.
Yes.
Is that right? And I believe you're going to share about CCRPI, which will just follow beautifully what the superintendent has said.
And I'm at Nickajack Elementary School. It's in Smyrna, the Cobb County School District. And I'll say that I have the opportunity to work in what I would say is a counselor's utopia. So we're talking a lot about ratios and relationships with administrators. And I've been at the school for 10 years with the same administrator. And I have the opportunity to do what a school counselor is qualified to do. So I'm just going to give you a quick snapshot of what that can look like and what our impact can be on CCRPI if we're given the opportunity. And I just want to highlight 5 of the indicators that we influence. These are not the only indicators that we influence, and we're not the only people that have a part in this. But we are, as school counselors, uniquely qualified to play a big role in these 5 areas. The first one being attendance. And one of our jobs is just to make sure that we're aware of those students who have poor attendance. that we're following whatever district policies there are for addressing attendance issues. We're working closely with our other school personnel, such as the school social worker, to provide supports for those families and finding out why are we late to school? Why aren't we here? And I can give you an example of that from this week. We had a student that was missing a lot. Well, in conversations, we find out that the student is now homeless. So our responsibility then is to figure out how can we keep them coming to our school consistently while they're in a place of transiency. So we have a bus now set up to get that student to school. But had we not reached out to them, that student would have continued to be tardy and absent from school. But also just recognizing our students for good attendance. I'm in an elementary school, so we're teaching them that this is a really important piece of being a student, but also being a professional when we look at the future for them. These are skills that are important for you to have. And then helping our students to feel more connected, those kids that aren't coming, maybe giving them a special job or responsibility so that they feel like it's important for me to be here because I'm the one that's in charge of setting this up in the morning before class starts. So there's lots of different ways that the school counselor can play a role in helping with attendance. Those are just some of them. But as leaders in the school, we have the opportunity also to impact the school climate. And that's another one of those indicators that we look at. Because we're leaders, there's an opportunity for us to set the tone of a positive school climate. We have an impact on the morale in our building, and we have opportunities to increase that. And it can be something as simple as just looking at pointing out positive things that are happening in our school community. There's so much focus on negative things. But an example of that, at Nickajack, we have an initiative where we practice random acts of kindness, and the students recognize each other, and staff members as well, on paper chains. And we link those together just to give the students a visual of what it looks like and how that continues to grow. So it's a chain reaction. And one of the things that we do is collect these chains, and we set goals for our students. We set a goal for them to collect 5,000. They collected 10,000. And there's a picture here of when we were able to go to the Georgia Dome with other schools from the Atlanta area and connect all those chains and look at what visually happens when we're focusing on positive things and building each other up. So that's one example of how we impact school climate, but when we look at our school climate surveys, we see that it makes a difference. We're not the only people impacting school climate, but some of those programs that we can initiate, we get positive results from our stakeholders. And looking at our survey results, they've since changed the survey, so this information stopped in 2013, but we saw a 15% increase when we were looking at over the years the work that we're doing, because we want to make sure the programs that we're impacting are making a difference with our school community. Achievement gaps are another area where we can really play a role. School counselors in an ideal world are at the table for those school improvement team meetings. So they know what the data is, they know what the school goals are, and they are aligning their school counseling program goals with the school goals. And they're looking at what can the school counseling program do to help make an impact in this area if this is the focus for our school. School counselors are charged with developing action plans and implementing those aligned with the school goals, and also keeping data and reporting the results on how those different programs they initiate impact the school, and then sharing those results with stakeholders. So I want to give you an example of what this looks like at Nickajack. We have a homeless shelter that feeds into our school, so one of the subgroups that we look at a lot are our economically disadvantaged students, and we knew that they were not performing as well on the state testing as some of our other students. So the school counseling program, that was our goal for that year. How can we help the economically disadvantaged students? So we were looking at focusing on reading and math with them. We went into the shelter, built a library for them with leveled books so that they had opportunity and access to those books. We encouraged them to read every night. We trained their moms on what that looks like, how do you do it. And then we also encouraged them to keep reading logs. We also went in the summer and provided a bridge program for them so that that learning didn't stop after the school year was out. And we've seen great progress with this. When we were still with CRCT, there was a 17.5% increase amongst those economically disadvantaged students in their math scores. And we went from an expectation in elementary school is a reading log. We went from students, our economically disadvantaged students, and specifically those students in the homeless shelter reading 0 books a week to reading an average of 50 books a week. So that was a huge growth for us in a way that we could help to impact those school goals in that subgroup according to CCRPI. Another area that we play an integral role, and I know there's been a lot of talk about career development, and again, we're not the only people that are working on career development in the elementary school. Our teachers do a lot with the career clusters, especially when they are aligned with their standards that they're already teaching. But we help to support that. We also do our career development lessons with them. We play an integral role in just working on those soft skills, like we talked about attendance, but other things that you need to be someone that's going to be employable in the future, somebody that has those work ethic and other skills like responsibility and respect. We guide the students through completing that career portfolio for CCRPI, and then there are some school-wide events that we organize as well in terms of those career days, career weeks, college days, and things like that. And then the last indicator that we impact that I want to highlight is PBIS. And that's something that we do have at Nickajack, and we are not in charge of PBIS, but we play an integral role in it. We serve as the coaches for the team. So we're involved in training the staff on that common language and expectations because we have an expertise in behavior and what motivates behavior and how to change behavior. We're a real important part of that team. We help to teach the rules and expectations to students through our lessons when we're in the classrooms. And a big part of that is rewarding the positive behavior of the students, but also using our data to identify some of those subgroups, again, that continue to struggle with it. So at Nickajack, when we looked at our behavior referrals, we noticed that 98% of them were coming from our male students. So another intervention that the counseling program did was a target group just focused on those boys that had the most behavior referrals, and working with them in a small group twice a week to help them feel more connected to school, but also to reteach in those areas where they needed help, being respectful, being responsible, practicing self-control, anger management, and all those things. We wanted them to feel a part of the school and connected. We have them wear school uniforms and ties. You can see a picture of it. Twice a week when they come to their meetings, we want to instill for them that you dress for success, and even something as little as coming to school with a tie on or their polo shirt can make such a difference just in the way that they carry themselves throughout the school and that they're seen as an important part of it. But what we saw is that in the fall, when we identified those students, the group had a total of 22 referrals to the office. By the time we were done with them and we looked at their referrals in the spring, we were down to 0. So we were able to reduce those behavior referrals by 100%. So those are just a couple of the ways, and I went really fast, but that we could impact CCRPI and a couple of those indicators. And again, I'm in that utopia where I have the opportunity to do these things and a whole lot more that I didn't have time to speak about today. But I'd be happy to answer some of your questions about what that looks like.
Thank you, Nicole. Are there questions? We've talked a lot about CCRPI, and we appreciate hearing the counselor's role in that. And I believe Representative Gazaway has a question.
When you said utopia, what do you mean specifically?
So you've heard a lot about the things that get in the way of us being able to do our job, the job that we're qualified to do. And I don't get a lot of those other duties as assigned. I have a relationship with my principal and it took a lot of advocacy on my part. I had to teach her and show her and use the data to say, this is what I can do. And so now when I come to her with an idea, she's like, absolutely run with it. So I'm also in a large district. I've got good district support. There's professional learning. So all of those pieces are in place for me. That's what I meant by utopia.
So the idea of doing the uniforms with the boys, is that your idea?
Well, it's something that's been done.
So you learned it in
School
of Hard Knocks?
I actually saw it on Oprah.
Okay.
There's a guy that did it there, and so we adopted the idea.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicole. That was very thorough and will be very helpful to us. And now, and last but certainly not least, we're glad to have Dr. Barbara Wall with us. And Dr. Wall, if you'll tell us your role at DOE and go from there.
Okay. I am the Director of Career Tech and Ag Education for the Department of Education. And the counselors fall within our division at DOE. I've worked very closely with counselors my entire career. I've been in career tech and ag education for over 30 years, either as a teacher or as an administrator. And I appreciate you asking me to come and speak to this group today, Representative Chandler. And what you've asked me to do is to speak specifically about the role of the school counselor in the career tech arena and workforce development. So that's what I'm prepared to do for you. And as you've heard, counselors do lots more than careers and career development, but that is a very important component of what they do. By no stretch of the imagination will I show you everything that a counselor does with career development, but I'm going to showcase some of the many important parts of it, of their roles here. Gone are the days of the guidance counselors or school counselors sitting in their offices and only handing out college applications to students and dealing with students with problems. What counselors do throughout our school districts, whether they're at elementary, middle, or high school, they manage comprehensive programs for every student, not just a select few of students. And the counselor development program, or the framework for Georgia counselors, actually consists of these three parts: the personal and social, educational achievement and lifelong learning, and career management. Counselors are constantly working with individual students, helping them to answer these three questions: who am I, where am I going, and how am I going to get there? Some of the specific career-related responsibilities of the elementary counselor includes developing career awareness. On each of these different school sections, elementary, middle, and high, I've given you a link that will take you to resources that specifically deal with these topics. I'm not going to pull that link up. You can go at your leisure and take a look at some of those resources. But all of these, many of these relate to the CCRPI. As you know, the counselors do not have their own evaluation or accountability system, but they certainly do assist in the accountability of the school through the different CCRPI indicators. And two of the indicators at the elementary school that counselors assist with are listed here. One has to do with the 17 cluster career areas that counselors at the elementary provide lessons to students on. We feel like that students need to be introduced to the 17 career clusters early on so that they can understand what different careers are out there and the choices that they can make. So in your packet, I've given you just an example of one of the career lessons for a first grader. Now, granted, every career counselor at the elementary level does not teach every single one of these lessons. It varies due to the flexibility that we instill at the schools. Sometimes the counselor may teach these lessons. Sometimes they may organize groups of teachers to teach these. They may have community folks that come into the school district and teach it. They may have a career fair environment that they provide this information to students at. But if you go through and you look at the complete resources, you can see all 17 lessons. And you will see that there is either 2 or 3 lessons that have to be taught at each grade level. First grade consists of a couple of lessons that have to be taught on different career clusters, one being logistics. And you have a copy of the lesson there, and you can see that it's pretty comprehensive. It has different national career standards. Here it has the American School Counselor Standards that are identified. It has all the materials they need. It's a good lesson, but it's not something that can be done in just a few minutes. Just wanted you to see the magnitude of that. Another thing that the elementary counselors do that's related to CCRPI and career counseling is at the 5th grade level, there is a career portfolio that students will be developing. Now, this right now is in the pilot phase, but as of next school term, this will be on the front part of the CCRPI, which means schools will truly be measured on whether or not 5th graders complete a career portfolio. Now, that career portfolio, like I say, the counselor may not be in charge of the whole thing, but they certainly have a big part in the role that they play with this portfolio. It's good that this portfolio is in place. This helps our students research career topics of interest. It helps provide opportunities for students to utilize and improve their reading, their research, their writing, and public speaking skills. All of these are skills that our business partners have talked with us about that are lacking in entry-level workers. At the middle school level, the main career responsibility of the school counselors is to explore careers and determine career interest and aptitude. I've given you a list of, it's like a timeline, and that's one item that came from the resource list for middle school counselors. This is a timeline for middle school counselor college and career-ready activities. It's pretty long, and it's very, very involved with what they have to do each month of the year. So, you know, that shows you some of what middle school counselors do in relation to careers. Some of the CCRPI indicators specifically related to careers that counselors address include these listed here. One is to help students have a graduation plan by the time they complete 8th grade. And the others are the inventories, career inventories that are done. Some schools do the aptitude, career aptitudes. I think that's an area where we need to beef up across the state and make sure that students do have an interest, but they also have the ability to pursue a particular career. The students who earn a passing score in at least 3 courses in a particular area, career exploratory being one of those, is another one of the CCRPI indicators, as well as the last indicator that's listed on here of the high school courses that are actually taught and credit is earned at the middle school level. And some of these are in the career tech area as well. At the high school level, this is a list of some of the items that the high school counselor does related to careers. They help identify students for work-based learning opportunities. They make sure that students are placed in the right courses that's related to their individual graduation plan. They complete applications for students seeking jobs. They help students with their applications for post-secondary schools. They write letters of recommendation. They help to organize career fairs. We're seeing many career fairs now organized in places other than just the high school. We're seeing that at the middle school level as well as the elementary school level too. These are some of the CCRPI indicators at the high school level related to the career tech area. And it's the first one is the percentage of graduates completing various pathways, career tech pathways being one of those. The percentage of students that complete the pathways and also receive a national industry credential. This is something that can help give students a competitive edge when they're pursuing a job. All of the Move On When Ready and dual enrollment is another part of school counselors' responsibilities. We're looking at, on the face of CCRPI next year, the percentage of graduates completing a work-based learning opportunity or a related capstone project. And this capstone project is more in depth than the 5th grade project, but it is a career research project, and it's an opportunity for students to have mentors in the work area, and they actually present to a group of business people on their findings. Another area that we will soon be addressing with the CCRPI is the area of the soft skills. This is one of the most crucial needs that business and industry tells us about. Now, I know that counselors help with this when they work with things like team building and getting along with others and all, but I have placed in your packet a handout that shows you the in-depth look at what business and industry really expects when they're talking about soft skills and employability skills. These skills are part of the core standard #1 in every career tech course. So, this is worked in every classroom that teaches career tech, but certainly counselors can assist with this in a variety of ways. When you think about all of these projects or initiatives that the counselors do related to career tech, I want you to see that they truly do relate to our career tech mission and vision. The mission of career tech is to educate Georgia's future workforce by providing experiences for Georgia students that will prepare them for the workplace. And our vision is that our CTAE students will graduate from high school with the soft skills, basic academic skills, and communication skills intact. It's very important that our counselors know what's driving our work in career tech in order to do a thorough job getting our students prepared for the workforce. We have 3 reports that's driving our work this year. One is the Pathways to Prosperity report from Harvard. The other is Georgia's Competitiveness Initiative Report and the Governor's High Demand Career Initiative Report. Through the Pathways to Prosperity Report, the main thing that counselors need to help us get across to students and parents is that most jobs, 60% of jobs as a matter of fact, will require some education beyond high school, but not necessarily a four-year college degree. Only 33% of those jobs require a four-year college degree. Counselors are not the only ones that have been telling students, we're all guilty of this, as a society, that you're not going to amount to anything, you're not going to get a decent job unless you get a four-year education. That's really not true. And this report, brings that information to light. Our counselors need to be aware that, this information is supported by research, and many of them are. We also need to make sure that counselors know about the skills gap so that they can talk with students about some job opportunities that go unfilled every year because there are too few workers with the necessary skills. The Georgia Competitive Initiative Report is another report that is critical for career counselors to know about. In 2011, there were 12 different regional meetings that took place in the economic development areas of Georgia. This was a group of business and community folks along with state government people. They met, they looked at the 6 key factors that impact economic development across all industries in Georgia, and you see what those factors are listed up there. But what they determined is that the number one factor that impacts economic development is education and workforce development. And when I hear those two words combined, it reminds me that career tech and ag education certainly has a very important place in economic development. The Governor's High Demand Career Initiative report came out in December of this past year, and it was a continuation of the Competitiveness Initiative report, and there were 8 overall trends that were identified. You see those trends there. If you look at the work that takes place in career tech can certainly be a solution to all of these trends. Not the only solution, but a good solution. The aging workforce, we have students ready to enter the workforce and can really participate and make a big impact through our work-based learning programs that our counselors help to get students in the right places. And you can see these other overall trends here. I've had the pleasure of visiting across the state since I've been here. We started this in July. I went with many of our state board members along with some of our other career tech division folks, and we wanted to sit down and talk to business and industry and really listen to what they say. Our questions to them were questions like, are your workforce needs being met? What can we do to better meet your workforce needs, especially on your entry-level workers? You see here where we've been, the places that we've visited, and the folks that we've talked to. You'll see that we've been to small business, large business, medium business. We've been in many different areas across the state. But as we travel the state and talk to business people, there are some common threads, and those threads are listed at the bottom of the slide. They tell us that soft skills are the number one problem, and we got to fix that, y'all. They've been talking about that for a long time, and we're working on some things in that area. And our counselors can certainly help with that. And if they know that soft skills is a problem, they can help bring that information home to students. We're also hearing about math skills. And when I thought, well, math skills, they're probably talking about those high-level math courses, calculus, statistics, and that type of thing. For some jobs they are, but for most of the jobs, they're saying the weakness in math is 8th grade math, that too few students have mastered 8th grade math. And that really hurts. So we've got to look at what we can do to help address the math problem. Communication skills is a problem mentioned quite often from business and industry, and they attribute that to the use of technology. Students constantly being on their cell phones, sending text messages which are incomplete sentences, and so forth and so on. And with the different programs that counselors work with students on, they can help with those communication skills. When the business people said the thing about the communication skills was a problem because of the technology devices, I thought, well, good, their computer skills are good. No, they said their computer skills are lacking too. My first thought was that's coding and programming and all of those advanced areas. That's true in some of the jobs. But in many of the jobs, what our business people are telling us is that those computer skills, the basic computer skills, like Microsoft Excel, Access, PowerPoint, and those areas. We don't really have much of an excuse for that in Georgia. Our legislators have funded Microsoft Academy IT for all of our high schools. Our counselors, knowing that this is a problem recognized by business and industry, they can help encourage more students to take those assessments and leave the schools with those credentials showing that they have mastered these computer skills that are needed in the workforce. Drug testing, financial literacy, driver's license, not being able to get a driver's license, those are other areas that our business people tell us are problem areas for entry-level workers. Counselors can know this information and can help work on their end to get students better prepared. Some of the recommendations that I have to you as a study committee, and I'm looking at this just through the lens of career tech and career development. I'm not thinking about the other pieces. But I do think that we need to provide an additional emphasis on career aptitude. I think as a state, we are doing a good job with career interest, but we need to beef up the career aptitude section. And I hope the counselors don't throw anything at me when I make this recommendation, but I feel very strongly about this. I believe that we should require the counselors to participate in a business and industry externship for at least 3 days a year. Now, I'm going to tell you why I believe that. Going to the different businesses and industry folks, I can't tell you how many of them say parents and counselors stand in the way of students selecting certain careers. This is coming a lot from manufacturing, but it's not only manufacturing. And to use the examples that the manufacturing folks have said, they said that, the parents and the counselors don't understand how manufacturing has changed today. It's not the same dirty, grimy, hard, laborious work that was of yesterday. It's clean. It's high tech. I believe that every career tech educator, not just counselors that are helping students with career tech choices and all, should spend some time in industry. I believe that so much that I myself, along with my staff, will be returning to industry for a few days in January of this year, just to know that we are up to date and in touch with what's really going on in business and industry. Most educators, most counselors went to school. And then they went to college, and then they started teaching school and really don't have a lot of career tech experience out there. So I think this is one way that we can do this. And I believe that internship needs to be more than just a checkbox. I've been to industry, spent 3 days, I can check that off and go on and move and do something else. The counselor and the career tech director in each local district need to work together and determine where the best placement is. And it shouldn't be the same place year after year after year. What are the workforce needs of that particular area, and what is the best placement for that externship? I think that we will learn lots by participating in externships. I also think that the counselor needs to be required to do something with that. What have they learned? Have they learned something specific about math in the workplace? Can this be shared with groups of students when they're working in small groups or whatever? Maybe they learned something specific about soft skills at that particular industry. Another recommendation is to provide some resources to assist with career development and provide professional development opportunities for counselors in the area of career and economic development. We've traveled the state, and we have 2 more of these left. We are doing some Partners Educating Georgia's Future Workforce meetings, and this is to help school folks and community people understand the connection between career tech and economic development. This is a draft agenda of what's been taking place in the different meetings. Now, each one of them takes a flavor of its own based on the business and industry that's there and the different folks in the community. But basically what we do is take a look at the workforce needs nationally, state, and regionally. We also take a look at different workforce development resources that are available through different agencies, and some are being created as we speak with our IT people. We have a panel discussion that's made up of many different business people, economic development people, and other representatives, work-based learning students, and they talk about different partnerships that's going on in that particular region and great career tech things that are going on. Business tours and Career Tech lab tours are also a part of these regional meetings. Now, we extended the invitations to all of these people that you see right here, and this does include the counselors. I'm a little disappointed with how many counselors that have attended, and I know they are bombarded with responsibilities, and if they could get away, I'm sure that they could. But at each of these 12 meetings, we have 2 left, but the ones that we've had so far, we've had an average of about 100 people there. But in total, we've had 16 counselors to register. So I'm hoping some more are going to come next Monday and Wednesday because this is just some good dialogue, some good basic information that counselors need to be aware of. Counselors do help convey a lot of Career Tech messages to parents, students, and the general public. They help to let students know that there are different pathways to a good job, not just college. And they help talk about pathway flexibility, and I know that that's something that many parents are concerned about. They feel like if a student selects a pathway in 8th grade, they're locked in. Y'all, that's not true. I met a young man in Ringgold, Georgia at one of our regional meetings, and when he was in the 8th grade, he decided he wanted to be a dental hygienist. He wasn't taking any healthcare classes, but that's what he wanted to be. And he was working at Captain D's 40 hours a week in addition to going to school. He was a great worker. They talked about his wonderful work ethic and all, but his job didn't really have anything to do with this pathway. He wasn't doing anything to get ready for that pathway, but that was his goal. So his work-based learning teacher got him a work-based learning job shadowing experience so he could go and job shadow a dental hygienist for a few days. He came away from there and said, I don't want to be a dental hygienist. And he just wasn't interested in that at all. The work-based learning teacher took a look at his transcript, saw that he had taken a lot of graphics courses, and encouraged him to apply at Dalton Utilities. And he now works. He did apply. He got the job while he was still in high school, worked as a youth apprentice there. He's in college now and is majoring in engineering. So, that student decided in 8th grade he wanted to be a dental hygienist. There was enough flexibility there to make him make a complete turnaround, and he's just one example. But the counselors are very good about getting that message out there that, we do need to have your student working in some area, but there is flexibility there. They help with, lots of these messages, the advantages of work-based learning, so forth and so on. I can't say enough good things about what our counselors do. They are truly one of the partners that have to be present in order to educate Georgia's future workforce.
Thank you so much. Are there questions? That was very thorough, Dr. Weil. And we appreciate it so much. I have one quick question. When you talk about career aptitude, are you when you talk about beefing that up, are you talking about instruments, formal instruments that would measure aptitude?
We like to leave flexibility with the local systems. So, it's whatever they decide is best to use there. There's several different aptitude assessments that are out there, and some are free, some are very costly. We just need to make sure that we are doing that and not forgetting that students have got to be more than just interested in a career. They've actually got to be able to handle that career.
And I don't think any counselors will throw anything to you about talking about an externship. They'd probably love to do that. It's just getting out of that.
They're probably saying, when do I have time for this? And we would need to work that within their schedule. That does not need to be something tacked on in the middle of the summer, or unless they want it that way. But I would see that as part of their school day, just 3 times a year.
Thank you so much. And I know it's late, but we had a couple of people to sign up, and this is our last meeting to have public comment. And so I feel like we need to hear from these folks. Just keep it brief unless you have something that we haven't heard that we need to hear, and then we want to hear it. Matthew Gamble from GSCA.
Well, thank you, Representative Chandler and committee, for the opportunity to speak briefly. I have prepared, the association has prepared for you bulleted points of some recommendations. Now, the amazing thing is that every one of these has been identified already. We've talked about each one of these at length through the course of the 3 meetings that you've had. 3 of them in particular were mentioned by David Hill during his presentation from the Professional Standards Commission earlier. I've been wanting to pick on Lee Hawkins the whole time, but he slips out early every time, and so Carl Rogers is the one that's been picking on him because I've been talking to Carl. But, you know, those dentists like to, they're kind of ill, pill, drill, and bill. And so he's not here. Y'all can tell him I was picking on him. But I want to say we've got a crisis in Georgia with school counseling. And I want to encourage you in your recommendations when you're thinking about, as legislators, what to do to help. I want to encourage you to keep the main thing the main thing. If we do something that maybe helps a little bit relief-wise, but it really doesn't address the core issue, then we're going to be back here in 5 years having the same conversation. And I'll use this as a point. Probably about 7 or 8 years ago, when Sonny Perdue was governor, he instituted a great initiative. They authorized hiring graduation coaches all across the state and provided funding in the state budget. Well, that was great. The unfortunate thing was that there was a lot of money spent on it. The people that were hired to do it, some were really qualified, but a lot of them were retired teachers that just needed a little something to do to come back, or coaches that wanted a little supplement. And so it lost effectiveness. And then when they rolled that funding into QBE and it wasn't specified, then most systems quit funding that position altogether. So I want to encourage you, when you're talking about other positions that could come in and help, let's just make sure that we keep the main thing the main thing. We've got to help these counselors who are just trying to keep their head up above water. I like Barbara's idea about doing externships. There's not a counselor in this state that wouldn't want to go do an externship and that shouldn't be able to do those externships. But if they're filing papers and they're doing immunizations for students, they're never going to get out of the building to do that. And so I'm not going to say anything else because I know we've all got to get out of here. But take a look at these, and y'all know how to reach me, and Representative Chandler, you do as well. And I appreciate your leadership. I know that this is not the most exciting issue, you know, to delve into, but I admire and I appreciate your leadership as legislators on this study committee to help try and figure out something to do for school counselors. It's such an important role, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Matthew, one quick question. On your number 5, about 80% of their time.
Yes.
Don't we already have a state law that says 5
well,
or 6 segments?
It's I don't think a state law. It's a.
It
was in House Bill 1187.
Yeah.
And then the State Board of Education has a state board rule that specifies the same thing. So if you try to say, well, let's go the policy route and deal with DOE, well, we already know that state board policy, it already says that, but what can we do to make it happen in local school systems? That's what we've got to address. So just think about that. But it was in House Bill 1187, which was Roy Barnes' education reform bill back in 2000. So
thank you. And Gail Smith from GSCA.
Madam Chair, members of the study committee, since we last met, a delegation of 10 educational leaders in Georgia, many of whom are in the room today, Dr. Barbara Wall, David Hill, Matthew, myself, and some others from UGA, traveled to the University in North Florida in Jacksonville for the 3rd Reach Higher convening hosted by the White House. Reach Higher focuses in part on the role of the school counselor in strengthening college and career advising. During the meeting, we heard inspirational reports from districts and states that have taken great strides to increase their graduation rates, FAFSA completion, post-secondary admissions, and graduation, with an emphasis on addressing the equity gaps at all levels in education. Our team, that team of 10, has also made commitments to increase our students' post-secondary completion, and we need your help. We are developing an action plan now, and we're hoping to begin to follow through with this action plan, especially after the findings of the study commission are released. Many of the recommendations we've shared with you, the handout that Matthew developed that you have in your packets, are the result of years and years and years of of working as a school counselor, and in my role as advocacy chair, listening to the voices of school counselors across the state. But it's also the result of the Reach Higher initiative and an ongoing national conversation about the role of the school counselor in all aspects of students' academic, career, and personal social development. I do have a couple of answers to some questions that were answered. Can I do that very quickly? Because I know we're all tired and my parking has expired. Yeah,
Please hurry.
I'm going to hurry. I don't even know what that ticket's going to be. When I was working on my leadership add-on certificate at a renowned program here in the metro area, I took a whole course on the custodian. It was a required course. I learned how to figure the square footage of a lunchroom, and I learned how many custodians to hire and how long it would take them to clean the lunchroom or to cut the grass. I learned how to set up a custodian closet. I learned about brooms and chemicals and that you don't mix these chemicals with this chemical. I learned everything that I need to know about a custodian, and I don't mean to minimize that, because as a school administrator, that is important. The work of that custodian is important, and an administrator oversees that work, and there are a lot of health and safety issues related to that work, and I understand. But not one time did we mention the role of the school counselor, the school social worker, the media specialist, or any of the other support personnel who works in the school. And that was our recommendation when we evaluated the program, to include information. If we're going to learn about custodians, then administrators or future administrators need to learn how to supervise and best use these other support staff. So that's just an FYI for you. Representative Gazaway, you asked about other national models. And recent research that ASCA did, where they've asked states what they have in place, 30 to 40% of our states have either policy and or legislation about the role of the school counselor, that 80% or 5 of 6 segments. South Carolina has legislation recently passed where they've not said what the counselors won't do, they've defined what they will do. Alabama is ahead of us in this initiative. Right now, they are finishing up doing what we've just begun, a state conversation about the role of the counselor. And you'll hear about Arizona and others, but all of these states are modeling their state counseling programs or their action plans after that comprehensive school counseling program we've talked about for the other 2 meetings, just so you know. But there is a national movement to implement this model in all states. So we're on the other side of the 50% mark right now. So wrapping up, speaking on behalf of the Georgia School Counselor Association, thank you for your participation on the School Counselor Study Committee. And Joyce, thank you so much for your leadership here. I appreciate that, and I know GSCA does. We look forward to strengthening our support for Georgia's students by partnering with you and other stakeholders to help our students reach their fullest potential. If GSCA or I can ever be of assistance, please feel free to contact us. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Gail. And as we close, if you have any other comments or recommendations, please email them to me, because we value your input. And we'll be meeting, as we said, again next Thursday in this room, but at 10:30. So thank you for being here.